Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching accesstv.org.
Good morning and welcome to the challenge. As always, first and foremost, I'd like to thank God for the opportunity and thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. We're delighted to have this morning's guest, a young man who has been around for a while, but still, I think, possesses all those qualities, the energy, the intellect, really the commitment to his community that all of us look forward to seeing in people who have those kinds of gifts. Somebody who I've just recently gotten to know, but I think possesses a very innate quality that would help any of us meet the challenges that have to be faced on a day-to-day basis. You know, what we do here at the Challenge is try to bring to you people who can talk to you about solutions to problems. And one of the reasons why we have the show is, frankly, to not only talk about the solutions to problems, but have you talk to people or have you listen to people who actually are working at the solutions to those problems. And that's who we have with us this morning as our guest. Dr. Chip Beckett is the chairman of the Capital Region Conference of Government. He's also a doctor of veterinary medicine and has had his practice for over 30 years. We're delighted to have you this morning, Chip.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you so much. Here. Always good to have good conversation and good guests who can share with us. But today I'm especially eager to talk to you about how necessary for us, if you will, those of us who are involved in things politically and involved in things in our community, how necessary it is for us to know what's going on around us. And quite frankly, I think that's what the Capital Region Conference of Government actually represents. So enlighten us, if you will. Tell us really, if you will, the mission of the Capital Region Conference of Government and why, frankly, it should be a part of the conversation and dialogue about what's happening here in Hartford and frankly, throughout the region.
Well, thanks. I think the main thing is that we live in a region of nearly 1 million people, and the city of Hartford is 120,000 of those. But if you're really going to have a successful economy, successful social justice interest, you have to look at the world as a region, because whether it's Chicago or Philadelphia or Dallas, these are not 17 square mile cities. These are hundreds of square mile metro areas with a lot of neighborhoods and communities, which CROG is 38 communities that makes up 1 million people. Varying in size from, I think, Andover has 5,000 people up to Hartford's 120,000, but collectively we're pretty big. It covers a wide area, Hartford and Talon County, a little bit towards Litchfield County, in the north towards Barkhamsted, and all the way down to New Britain. So I think people don't realize quite the scale of it. And we're a very mobile society. And so most people don't work where they live. So most Hartford residents work in the suburbs. And obviously there's been talk, but a lot of suburbanites work in Hartford. But with 450, 500,000 people that work, leaving out children and elderly and things like that, there's a lot of mobility, and you can't say everybody's going to one community or another because they're all going back and forth.
Sure.
And so CROG, one of its big things it deals with, it does homeland security and police coordination to to help with things like the Hartford Distributors accident, mass casualty events, terrorism episodes, that sort of thing. And then it also does a lot with transportation. So we're the ones that really spearheaded the busway, which, from New Britain to Hartford, and now it's going to be extended to Manchester. There's 150,000 jobs on that corridor within a mile of the busway, which, is within walking distance. And I think we're doing a study now with Connecticut Transit to try and change the bus routes that were set up in the trolley days of 100 years ago, where people didn't have the mobility of cars. They didn't live as far out. Jobs were all in the central city for practical purposes. It was all farms outside of that. So now how do we integrate that better so that the busway becomes our subway line? And next year, hopefully, or shortly thereafter, we'll have the Hartford rail line that goes from Springfield to Hartford, which will connect Enfield, Windsor, Windsor Locks, Hartford, and down to West Hartford, Newington. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us going forward.
It's pretty obvious to me, and I think to a lot of others, that the architects and the engineers who first designed the city and the cities and or towns could not have anticipated the amount of growth that we're experiencing now. And so what's happened is that there's almost a compelling reason for changing transportation, both ground, and air, and a whole bunch of other things that would think. But how do you, as an organization, if you will, meet the needs with any, expedite, if you will, the needs of addressing those kinds of things?
Well, we have our policy board that gets together basically every month except during the summer. And I think we try to coordinate things, and our policy board is the chief elected officials or the town managers of the 38 towns, to try and form a common vision.
Okay.
And we need everybody involved, and some communities don't participate for a variety of reasons, as effectively as they might. I mean, many of our suburban towns, they're volunteer mayors or first selectmen, and so they have to work, so they can't go to meetings. Right. But that's where the town managers in those towns tend to come in their place. And then we have, there's a staff at the CROG offices right on Main Street in Hartford that works on a lot of these issues for the details. And they're long planning horizons. The busway took 17 years or something, and it's almost criminal how long it takes to get through the whole process.
Well, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm thinking about how congested, the traffic seems to be in the mornings and in the afternoon. And so I'm wondering, is there a way in which, the process can be sped up? I think that a lot of us, even though I live in the city of Hartford, we're concerned, that, that ties up, activity with respects to the city of Hartford, in some ways can be a hindrance to its actual growth, and actually being able to recruit and to bring other people into the city.
Well, I think when we went into the 50s, we probably had a nominal road structure, and I wasn't really alive for that period of time.
Right.
But when cars became widely available, everybody thought you would drive. And even in the 1920s, rural America adopted cars, and Connecticut was fairly rural. And so I think they were very helpful. What I think hurts, and we've seen in all our suburban towns as well as the city, is while a car is very enabling for a person to go from their home to another location, if you get hundreds and thousands all want to be at the same place at the same time,
Yeah.
it makes a real problem.
Yeah.
You cannot bulldoze enough buildings to still have an attraction
Right.
to
Right.
fit all those cars so
Right.
nobody has any delays.
Right.
Hartford has an issue, but Glastonbury has an issue about where do you park these cars when people get to where they want to go.
Right.
Because, and then we bulldoze lots of land. You take a picture of Hartford or Glastonbury, there's virtually no green space, but it's all asphalt for parking cars.
Right.
And so that's been adapting our buildings and our architecture
Right.
to cars has been, I think, a big burden. I think as far as why we're so separate is Connecticut was founded on the Congregational Church being the governmental authority in the 1600s. And what happened is that people needed to be able to get to church every Sunday morning. And so you could only have a church as far apart as people could reasonably walk.
Right.
Well, hence 8 to 10 miles is why we have all these different town centers, because Hartford originally went from Farmington to Vernon.
Oh.
You know, so people, and we had Hartford, Windsor, and Wethersfield, which still would take up, if you had the original boundaries, those 3 towns would take up probably 60% of Greater Hartford.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I mean, that's, you know, and I'm not sure if you know, a lot of our viewers even realize that that's the, you know, those were the boundaries that were in place earlier. So there's an evolution, obviously, that's taken place. But I guess too, and I guess I stumble over this because I'm wondering if the evolution has actually been able to meet the pace at which things, you know, seem to be changing. Because
no, I don't think it has, because I think we went through the 17 and 1800s thinking we needed a smaller and smaller subdivision so people could act. And yet when you got railroads and telegraphs and then cars, and now the internet and instant access, we've gone from a very small, where you can walk easily in a day,
right,
conduct business and go back home, to we can cover miles and miles and miles in fractions of a second with the internet. So I think we do need to think about new, better ways of doing things. And I think the individual towns burdens us. My best example in my life is my daughter was trying to put on a farmer's market, and there was somebody that sold honey, and they needed a health license in the town she wanted to have this market in, and he had to pay $65 for a health license for the afternoon. And you know, it just became uneconomic for this poor guy that was probably going to sell maybe $100 worth of honey to pay that much. And yet every town, the state health code requires every town to get a health license. Now there's one state health code. Why don't we have his hometown issue him a permit to cover the entire state of Connecticut, or at least Metro Hartford, if we're going to work as a region? Well,
you bring me to a point that I was hoping we'd get to, you know, this morning, and that's, you know, the need, frankly, for, you know, a greater sense of collaboration. I think people tend to separate the cities from the suburbs, but there's really an economic interest, and there's an economic, I think, advantage to you know, maintaining a relationship with the suburbs. I know at one time, you know, all the talk was about regionalization, all the talk was about annexation, and I thought that was simply about sharing resources. You know, but we have a lot of common interests now. We have a lot of common problems now. So why aren't we doing more? And especially when we talk about the political landscape, why aren't we doing more in terms of collaboration Do you have an answer, or do you have a,
Well,
a theory on that?
I
theory
think I
or
have a theory.
Okay.
I think what happens is because we have all these small towns and we primarily pay our taxes by property taxes. Half the taxes in the state are collected by towns by property taxes. That we really identify with the town that we sleep in, and we tend to think in terms of the roads, the public services, the shared services. To go to another town, we don't pay for, they don't count.
Right.
And so we've gotten this very balkanized idea that everybody's an island. Well, we aren't an island. We're more like a big family.
That's right. That's right.
I tell people, you know, if you travel very far away, somebody asks you where you're from, they don't say Terrafil or, you know, play Arsenal. And you say, I'm from Hartford, and I fly into Bradley Airport. Because the airports are really, for metropolitan regions, I think are really the way people define themselves by where they're from. You know, I'm from New York, I'm from Chicago, I'm from Dallas, that sort of thing. So it's what airport you fly into, or the main airport for where you fly into, is sort of where we identify the region we're from.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to have to take a break right here. We're talking this morning with Chip Beckett, the chairman for the Capital Region Conference of Government. Give us a moment and we'll be right back.
When I grow up, I'll be your doctor.
I will be a firefighter, or maybe the fire chief.
I'll be a Supreme Court justice.
I'm attorney Jeffrey Dressler. I advocate education. It lasts a lifetime.
And I'm Mayor Pedro Segarra. Be a part of your children's education. Together, we can help our children fulfill their dreams.
I would have been no other way. Hey, now. Ooh. Hi, this is Worm Beast, and you're watching Access TV. Don't touch the dial. Only you. Only you. Hey.
We're here this morning with Chip Beckett, the chairman for the Capital Region Conference of Government. Chip has, shared with us stuff that we don't necessarily get a chance to hear with respects to CROG and what its mission is and how they are to interface, if you will, with other towns and how they're working with other towns. And Hartford is a part of CROG, but unfortunately has not participated in CROG as often, if you will, and as much as others would want them to be. And I just don't know necessarily why, but I don't know if you necessarily want to share with us a theory on that, Chip, why it is that the larger cities, if you will, are becoming more and more isolated, if you will, and separated, if you will, from the suburban towns.
Well, I think because people identify with where they sleep, where their kids go to school, they think of that as where they're from. And they don't think of us as our region as a big family. And
Right.
and you know, it's more like going to see your little sister or your big brother crossing town lines. And so I think that we don't have that sense of family. We have separate islands.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really work, I think, in the modern internet age.
Well,
and with the mobility we have.
And I couldn't agree with you more because, you know, I just happen to come from a place, it's southern, and you know, with the size of the towns that exist, you know, in CROG, in this region, you know, you got 125,000 in Hartford, you know, 60 or 70,000 in the outlying, you know, towns, larger outlying towns. That is just one city. And so, you know, to me, because the problems are a lot of the same, we have common interests, common goals. You know, to me, we ought to be working, you know, more strategically, more tactically to address the issues that we all face.
Well, and I think, so what do we have? The issue really is, what do we have to bring us together? I think transportation is a big one that we've worked on a lot. And how do we get better metropolitan transit rather than just town transit? Because people tend to focus on the intersection at the corner of Main Street and X doesn't work well.
Right.
But we really have to get people from this town to 2 towns over for jobs, shopping, schools, special cultural interests, whatever. I think that's one thing. The other thing is economics. You know, Hartford, I think, has 100 languages spoken, but the suburban towns might have 15 to 50 languages spoken in their towns.
Yeah.
So we're a very diverse group of people. We've had a lot of immigrants come into Hartford and Connecticut over hundreds of years. Do we really take advantage of that cultural identity, that there's a variety of restaurants that you can basically eat across the world in a different place? And are they advertised for people to see? Which
is amazing. I mean, you know, the 100 languages, I mean, that just, to me, is so rich. And, you know, I mean, to me, I don't think you can find anything like that, quite frankly, in this country, and perhaps even throughout the world. 100 languages, Chip. Think about that.
Well, it's very, very diverse, but you know, you could either complain that those people don't blend in, or you can say, let's celebrate this diversity and make use of it. It could be the United Nations of whatever. Have we used our business contacts, whether it be Eastern Europe, Caribbean, Latin America, Asia, to say, exchange goods or services, or do we have a cultural entree to them that we're the importers of something or the exporters of something to them? I think there's a lot of opportunities there, but we need to think in terms of how do we use our strengths. I will say that, you know, I went to school in the Midwest. I think Connecticut and Greater Hartford waste many more opportunities than most people get in here. I think there's a lot of opportunities, and we just kick them to the curb constantly. But I think we could do something. I really hope that we can start to work on our small business ability to start and operate, because I think the rules and regulations are very cumbersome. But yet, when you look at this recession and over 50-year-old people can't get jobs, kids that are 18 to 25 can't get jobs. What can we do to let people make their own jobs and be self-sufficient because they want to be entrepreneurs? That's not to say they won't work for a big company or government at some point, but if that opportunity is not available, or they want to stay in this location because of family obligations or whatever, I think let's try and make a way that people can really do something. Silicon Valley was based on small businesses, not large. So let's focus on how do we have startups and new businesses and the new ideas that 150 years ago was Pratt & Whitney and Colt Manufacturing and Aetna Insurance, the Hartford Insurance. Those were all new ideas back in the 1800s.
You know, obviously there had to be a reason for, those who decided to move to the suburbs, made the decision, because I'm finding out, more and more that a lot of those folks who are living in the suburbs now at one time did live centrally and within the larger cities. So it was a natural evolution of sorts, because people, I think, wanted the opportunity, if you will, to grow their own communities, to to be the kind of entrepreneurs that you're.
Well, and I think the population has increased. We have 300 million people in this country, and in the Depression we had 130 or something.
Right.
So 3 times the population in a regional area. And I know both my grandparents lived in Hartford, and then my parents moved to East Hartford and then to Glastonbury. But you're right, Russell, lots of people have done that, and we're still from the same area. And why did people move to suburbs? A little bit of open space instead of apartments. Cars provided the opportunity that we could have a backyard that was bigger than we did before, and a baseball wasn't going to go through the window necessarily. So I think the suburbs grew because we had car transportation and cheap open land. I think the problems of car transportation are becoming more apparent. Our young millennials would like to take transit and use bicycles. It would certainly do a lot for our public health if we walked or bicycled more as far as diabetes and heart disease. So I think that would be something to try to involve if we can.
Well, the beauty of that to me is that, you've maintained a certain standard of living and a certain standard of excellence in a lot of those places that, you won't let go of. And
that's absolutely correct.
And I think that that's really, the message, if you will, to to urban areas or to other areas who might be experiencing, a downward spiral of sorts or a downturn.
I think many of the people of the suburbs work in the national and international business environment. It's very, very competitive, and excellence is like a minimum qualification to play the game.
Sure.
So excellence in services has to be the driver in government. I mean, we need to take care of the people that need to be taken care of appropriately, with a minimum of bureaucracy and a minimum of fuss and muss.
And, you guys have tons of examples, because you mentioned, the red tape of getting permits and those kinds of things. And, God knows we struggle at DMVs. I mean, and it just doesn't make any sense to me anymore for us to have had a process or have processes like that for so long to still be struggling with them.
Well, I think
streamlining.
I think one of the problems is I think we probably have computer systems that converted paper systems to computers, and we didn't stop and say, what can we do? My business, I have several licenses or registrations, but the Secretary of State has everything. Why do I have to fill out another form 5 or 6 times a year with the same information? Why can't the Secretary of State, now this is a state issue, but the towns administer a lot of these things, but why can't you do it once, have a database of what it is, and you can verify it, but you could verify it once a year and get all the credentials you need. This license is $150, this one's $500, this one's $1,000, go down the list. But there's a lot of businesses that have a whole bunch of things. DMV is another example. I mean, why can't you buy a car from a newer used car dealer? Why can't they type it in and give you the plates right there? Do you really need to go to Wethersfield or some other one of 6 service centers to do it?
I think in some ways, they're just trying to justifying their own existence, unfortunately. But I think that they really are kind of behind the times. Really,
well,
I think.
Well, I think it's behind the times. I think people say, well, we've always done it this way, and we've got all these people. And I think one of the things we're doing at CROG is we're trying to do some of the back office computer systems for towns, not with a stick, but with a carrot. We now have high-speed internet that the towns are almost all hooked up to in Metro Hartford.
Beautiful.
And so we're coming out with a human resources portal to help manage personnel issues, job descriptions and things like that. We're doing document filing online so that people don't have to keep paper files, and it's a secure backup, just like with the banks and the insurance companies, the same servers in the state of Connecticut. We've got other things, online building permits. So I think we're trying to look at how can we have a single system that every town can just log into and use it for the behalf of their citizens, so that you don't have to go to town hall, which ultimately will mean we need less clerks. But I presume that that would happen much more by attrition, that people move, get a better job opportunity, or decide to retire. But even that is probably 10% a year. Government employees will not disappear, but maybe it will ratchet down by 30%, or potentially could ratchet down by 30% with technology over the next 10 or 15 years, just like business has less people.
Right.
You know, people don't use an adding machine and add up bank balances anymore like they did years ago.
Yeah. You know, I my hope, if you will, Chip, is that, you know, we do embrace the whole notion of this being one family. And because I think we are. I think that there's a whole lot of mending offenses, if you will, that has to happen. That's probably a lot of work on relationships that has to occur, but it's all worthwhile, and it's all, in my opinion, very necessary, especially at a you know, where we are now as a country, as a state, really as a town, because you know, you mentioned off the bat, you know, homeland security. You know, it doesn't take you 20 minutes to go from one town to another, you know, within the city, you know, within any place within the state of Connecticut. So, you know, I see, you know, you and CROG and the other towns that are involved, you know, sort of bridging the gaps that, you know, that exist between towns and, you know, some of the larger cities. And I think that it's really now more necessary than ever.
I think so. And I hope we can all work together, because, you know, you look at I-84 and how much traffic is. A lot of it goes to Hartford, but a lot of it's going from West Hartford to East Hartford or Manchester. And so I think we're all in it together, and we need to think about how do we make it work for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I you know, there's so many things that come to mind. I'm going to have you back. You're going to have to tell me what happened to regionalization and annexation. I know, you know, you gave me a little bit of a snippet at one point, but I think it's a great idea. I don't know why it hasn't come to fruition. You know, I'm sure you can tell me part of the reason why, but hopefully that's still on the table.
Well, you know, we have an election coming up. I hope that's a topic for the discussion with the Hartford City Council.
Well, so do I. You know, actually, I'm counting on that. You know, I'm making a bid for City Council here, and you know, my hope is that those folks who are outside of the city of Hartford will weigh in on what's happening in the city of Hartford. And if you got friends or family, you know, who still live in the town, make sure they're participating in the process, because I love that, you know, you embrace the notion of this being a family affair, if you will, because I certainly feel that that's the case. And I think a lot of others feel the same way as well. Chip, it's a pleasure having you here this morning. We could talk on and on and on, but I know you got a business to run. So, you know, it's certainly been a pleasure having you here this morning. You got parting words for us?
Thanks very much. And just, I hope everybody does talk during the election about what's important to them and how to have excellent services in the city of Hartford and the whole metro region.
Chip Beckett, ladies and gentlemen, the chairman for Capital Region Conference of Government. I can see why he's been chosen, frankly, to head up that organization. Certainly possess the qualities of leadership that I would look for in someone who would be heading up the charge to make things better in our communities. Thank you for tuning into the challenge this morning. Remember, be blessed.